I think we're probably at the time when we should get rolling. I don't know that anyone else will come rolling in. Mr. Myers, you on the phone?
You're busy.
We are too.
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Cool. Okay, we'll start. Today is July 10th, 2025. This is Rules Committee of the Assembly. We're on the schedule today from 1 to 3 p.m. It's 1:06 p.m. We'll start with introductions. Mr. Rivera.
Felix Rivera. Thanks.
Aaron Baldwin Day.
Zach Johnson.
Yarrow Silvers.
Daniel Volant.
Anna Brawley.
Christopher Constant. On the phone, we have Mr. Myers.
Yes.
Hi there. And then we also have Legislative Services. We have attorney and our intern, attorney and our legal intern. We have the clerk's office, ombudsman's team. We have someone from APD here. So welcome, everybody. Today, we will dive right in, and I have on the agenda, first item is the Above and Beyond Award. It says Mr. Rivera, but I think Ms. Baldwin Day. Maybe it's a Midtown special. So go ahead and take the floor.
It is a Midtown special. Thank you, Chair. I am so delighted to get to give this award. I would like to introduce all of you to Steph Figarelli. Actually, can I ask you to come sit? So Steph Figarelli is a Midtown resident, and interestingly enough, we went to high school together and then have not seen each other for about 20 years. And I received an email via Felix in my inbox from a constituent who is really, really concerned about the health and the cleanliness of Campbell Creek. And she was sharing with me about this incredible human being, Steph Figarelli, who has devoted hours and hours of time to trash cleanup both around and in, and I do mean in with chest waders, Campbell Creek, and has also mobilized other citizens, other volunteers to actually help to make our green spaces and waterways a better place and a healthier place for people to enjoy and recreate. And it's worth noting that Steph already works alongside Parks and Rec and already has a great relationship with other spaces in the administration. And I really thought that it was time to recognize a really outstanding citizen and someone in Midtown who is really putting their time and their money and their effort where their mouth is. So I'm so delighted to introduce you all to Steph Figarelli and to present her with the Above and Beyond Award for, I guess, this meeting. And I would love for Steph to share a little bit more in detail about the work that she does and how this whole thing got started. And Steph, we would be remiss as a government entity if we did not give you a super nerdy mug and a citation. So thank you.
Nice. Congratulations. That's great.
I don't know, Leila, you shouldn't be hiding over there. Yep, when the green light's on, you're good.
All right. Well, thank you guys for having me, and thank you very much for this award. I really appreciate it. I wasn't expecting it at all. As Aaron said, we went to high school together. I've lived in Anchorage since 1988 and moved here when I was 6. I didn't get into really doing much in the backcountry or hiking or anything until I was a little bit older. So I can't say that, I grew up really paying much attention to our green spaces, and, I walked and we had beautiful trails and things where I could recreate, but I don't think I really appreciated it until I got older. Last summer I was motivated or inspired to get a little bit more involved in volunteer work. After a walk I'd gone on with my dog where I'd seen quite a large amount of trash just dumped in a place where I couldn't really believe it was left. And I didn't know the story, didn't really know where to go from there. So came home, started calling BLM, Parks and Rec, didn't really know, like, who do I contact? Who's, how can I get involved? And what my plan was to organize a group and clean it up. And I was told that it was likely from a nearby encampment and that it wouldn't be possible for me to participate in cleaning it up due to the fact that there might be, biohazards or anything like that. And I didn't know what was the trash was made up of. So I said, okay, cool. But I thought, well, if nothing else, I can find a way to just get more involved in helping and volunteering. So I became a volunteer with Parks and Rec. I became a volunteer with Alpar, and just started cleaning up the street I live on. Because I think it just looks better, it feels better, and then people see you. It got me out talking to people in the community, and I thought that was really cool. People would stop and talk to me, and I thought, oh, this is such a cool way to meet people. Like, forget apps, like meet it, like people are always trying to meet friends or whatever. It's like, well, if you're single and you're looking, to possibly find somebody and date, go pick up trash. If you just want to find like hiking buddies or people who are interested in the same things, like people who are recreating out on the trail, which I love our trails. And I work with a lot of people in the fitness industry where I'm encouraging them to get out and exercise, get their movement. And the response I often get is, well, I don't feel safe out there. And I don't, primarily women. And, them just saying, well, if there wasn't evidence of these encampments and people making me feel uncomfortable. And I thought, well, if nothing else, I can get my finger on the pulse of the community and see what's really going on out there and come back with stories and ideas for the people in my life who are potentially concerned about safety and, being healthy and all this stuff and wanting to be more active and not necessarily knowing that it's possible for them to do that safely. So anyway, got out, started picking up trash. And then last fall, last year, our summer was quite rainy, but I had this idea to do a creek cleanup when I saw a bunch of stuff just floating in like a log dam. And I thought, okay, well, maybe we could just get a crew out there and just pick it up and get it out of the creek. And of course, that's a pretty long creek and there's a lot going on. And we ended up organizing a group of 10. One of our good friends who joined us is a biologist with Fish and Game, and she had a lot of insight and information about the importance of Campbell Creek and keeping it clean for fish and other things. And she's been working with me this summer quite a bit here and there when she can, just on a Sunday when she has time. And we've gone out a couple times to just, pick up garbage. So yeah, it's been a passion project. Every now and then I'll get somebody who'll tell me I don't have to do it. It isn't my job, but I have more of this mindset, like, in a community, it's not, we have a responsibility to take care of our community. I feel that very strongly. And, inspiring other people to believe that as well is not necessarily easy. So instead of talking about it, I just go out and do it. And I set goals for myself again. And I've talked about, I have trash pickup weight goals. If I can, I'll weigh the trash because people like that. They like the numbers. They like the information. They like to see a before and after photo. A lot of people are very concerned. I had a friend share a post on Facebook and it had a lot of feedback or a lot of attention that ended up resulting in 31 people coming out with me on a Saturday in May. Like the May 10th, we went out and pulled out quite a bit of trash from Campbell Creek. And so, and this is a little over an hour, we pulled out like 1,800 pounds of trash. And some of it was like wet clothing, so it's heavy or whatever. But still, it was like people were so excited and proud, and it brought a lot of people together who, to this day, I texted somebody last week to come out and help me, and she couldn't come because she was going to go hiking and fishing with a guy she had met at our first creek cleanup. And so I was like, she's like, yeah, I can't, whatever, hit me up for the next one. So, people are meeting each other, and I've made a couple clicks. So I'm telling you, this is the way, this is the hack. To meeting people and socializing is trash cleanup. It's very unknown, and but anyway, so it's been a lot of fun, and we've gone out 4 times with a group. And more recently, what was concerning was my friend at Fish and Game her crew had gone out to count salmon in the creek, and they had discovered that there were quite a few large trash bags that somebody had thrown in the creek, and they were able to get photos. And at the time, all of it was jammed up in one section. So looking at the photos, I thought, oh, we could get out there and just throw these things out and it'll be easy. But the creek is flowing. And so the trash is flowing, and we couldn't get out there for a couple days. But we eventually did. We got out and got a few, probably 20, 22 bags and a couple shopping carts up out of there. So there's still a lot to do. Obviously, it's probably going to be an ongoing issue, I would assume, as long as camps are living that close to the creek. I've never had a problem with anybody on the trail or doing what I'm doing. In fact, a lot of people in even nearby camps will stop and thank me. Sunday, somebody asked if I was on parole, and I was waiting for that question. It hasn't come until now. And I laughed and I said no, but I could have probably had more fun with that question. But so it's fun. It's funny. It's always a really good conversation out there, regardless of who it is I interact with. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been very rewarding. And then, of course, this is awesome and very unexpected. And yeah, connecting with Aaron has been great, and everybody else I get to interact with. So anyway, thank you guys so much for having me and recognizing this effort. And I'll keep doing it. I love it. It's actually, oddly enough, how I kind of de-stress. So
Steph has a Facebook group, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken, where some of these cleanup announcements get made. So if you want to try trash dating or otherwise connect with people in the community, Steph, what's your Facebook group called?
From trash to impact is what we're calling it, just for funsies.
Yeah.
We're just a group of people who like to hang out and pick up trash.
Okay. So from trash to impact. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Steph, would you talk to? I have a reporter who's doing some kind of offbeat stories. Would you talk to them? Would you be interested?
Say it again.
I have a reporter who's doing some offbeat stories, things that aren't like kind of the awful things going on. Would you be
Absolutely.
interested? Okay.
Yeah, anything. Yeah,
Connect you.
I'm
Okay.
happy to spread the
you.
positivity.
Yeah, let's tell the good stories. People need to hear more of it. Thank
Yeah,
you for
you're welcome.
your work. Felix.
Yeah, thanks. So, gosh dang, stupid meta. What is the name of the group again?
From trash to impact.
Yes. Okay, great. I will go ahead and join that group because I am single and ready to mingle.
All right, let's go. We're gonna find you somebody. Awesome. I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna develop an app.
Yeah, I don't know
A
what the name
dating
would be.
Friend meetup, trash cleanup.
A lot of
app.
opportunity there. Yeah.
There you go. There
All
you
right.
go.
Well, thank you for serving our
Absolutely.
community. All right.
Absolutely. Thank you guys.
The next item on our agenda is our Employee of the Quarter presentation. And so I don't have the notes about the why, but I know why. This quarter, we're going to recognize May Ramirez Zhang as our Employee of the Quarter. She's our steadfast deputy ombudsman who's been around longer than most of us have been participating in the work of the municipality. We are sadly seeing her move forward into the next evolution of her career to the state. This is our opportunity to say thank you and congratulations. And this quarter, at least until you're out the door, you are our Employee of the Quarter. And as is the tradition, you get a trophy. You just have to put it together yourself. Okay, now let's dive in. Chair's report, I'll just briefly say, don't have a ton to offer at this time. We are going to have a discussion later in the agenda on participation and pending business discussion, rules of decorum from Matthew, and this just kind of sparks on some of the conversations that have popped up on the dais, but we'll get to that later. It's on the agenda, and I wanted to talk briefly about liaisons.
Yeah, first, sorry, we're behind. It's been a busy summer. And I know I've talked to several of you about the various liaison positions. A lot of those are really opt-in because it's an external, like Anchorage Chamber, for example, they have their own process for selecting a board. And so we want to kind of wrap up getting that full list together. If you haven't communicated, if you're really interested in a position and you haven't reached out to me and Chris, please do that. And then I'll also say, I just told our members, we had a really fortunate thing where only 2 people wanted to be the representatives for Anchorage Community Development Authority. So we didn't have to do a Hunger Games style fight over it. And so Zach Johnson and Yarrow Silvers will be those members. So they do need to go through the process of being put on the agenda and confirmed. So you'll see that on a future agenda. We'll communicate to the administration because I believe they initiate that process. And then I know Mr. Volan Dan has been serving on that position. So thank you for your service and then stepping back from that service to do other things. And beyond that, I think we'll work through. But if there are groups that you do want to be on the board of that are outside of the purview of our official process, you should speak to those folks. And then I know there's also been some discussion. Part of the reason why we're going to hold off finalizing that list otherwise is because I guess there's some committee assignments to maybe shift. So also if you're in that category and you haven't already talked to Chris or myself, then please do so. But we'll try to get that wrapped up. So not that we're pushing folks out of where they are, but just that's the status. Thanks.
So, and I'll just add that even with ACDA, there might be some more discussions, but that's tentatively where we are right now. We will finalize everything probably by the 1st. We keep saying that, and it's just challenging with all these new members and all these new interests, and some members with interest but no time, and trying to figure out what is really going to happen is tricky. So thank you, Anna. Next, we'll have a report from the clerk. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. The mayor has arrived. Surprise, welcome. I got a note that said you weren't going to be here, so I'm glad you made it.
Yes, happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to give a brief report. You all may have seen the news that for the first half of 2025, we have doubled the number of multifamily housing units permitted. Yeah, that's great news, and that's compared to last year. And that represents a big collaborative effort, so thank you all for your support. ADU permitting also up as well. And actually, there's increased permitting for all construction types, and it's a record number of ADUs for 2024. You may also have seen the news about the prosecutor's office. We are fully staffed with frontline prosecutors, thanks to Municipal Attorney Eva Gardner and our prosecutor Dennis Wheeler. And so I also would like to note that actually the only position that's open is a deputy municipal prosecutor. That's vacant, but again, we are fully staffed at the frontline level. I also want to thank this body for its ongoing support of our public safety departments, which is a nice segue into the upcoming budget season and the series of meetings we will all be having together. I'm looking forward to those conversations around how we fund our shared priorities, and thanks in advance for your work there. I wanted to give you a heads up on an item that will be on the addendum, and this is an AO for introduction regarding the tax incentive for housing rehabilitation for vacant and abandoned buildings. Since implementation of the tax abatement code that was approved earlier in the year by this body, we have received feedback on ways in which it can be improved. And so this ordinance will create a new chapter 12.80 for rehabilitation, and it will address those issues that are already existing in code. And then finally, I wanted to note that we are here to help and recognize that all of you are asked by your community councils and constituents for information. And so please do not ever hesitate to reach out. I'm here with my chief of staff, Suzanne Fleek Green, who is an incredible resource. Graham Downey is also someone I know many of you already work with, and then our municipal manager, Becky Wint Pearson, Chief Administrative Officer, Bill Falsey, are all really great resources and available to help. And I wanted to say too, when it comes to amendments, and I know that there are just some that have to be done on the floor. I appreciate the thoughtfulness and that you all approach amendments and, you know, often ask for the administration's opinion. And the more heads up you can give us to be able to, you know, dig in and provide helpful, complete feedback, the better. And so just again, we're here to help and provide information and, you know, want to make sure too that when we're reviewing something, we are giving thorough and helpful feedback. So thanks again for the opportunity to be here. Suzanne, did you want to add anything?
No,
I think you
covered it.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Chris.
Myself briefing the queue, and I'll just say that today there was a great article by Kyle Hopkins, kind of a follow-up on the article he did 9 months ago that kind of detailed the failure of the prosecution system, courts, state, local, and that it's better. And so I appreciate seeing that. Now, we had a chat. You had mentioned something about a threshold of shoplifting prosecutions that are happening really as a benchmark so people can understand. Perception is always lagging. We hear, oh, all of this stuff is happening. Stores are closing because of shoplifting. Can you share with members kind of where we're at in that context?
Yeah, we are prosecuting shoplifting charges, ones that might be considered lower level or ones we haven't been able to do in the past.
So just for public and members understanding, like we haven't had that since 2018 maybe, or even before. And so it's just a really sign of a healthy department that we're able to start managing through some of the things that are maybe seem petty, but in the aggregate are really impactful. So thank you, Mayor.
And if I can just add that, you know, we've had a lot of conversations with business owners and we have heard loud and clear that the extremely high shoplifting shrinkage rates that many of our businesses are experiencing is, you know, something that has made some of them consider closing their doors. And so we've been working closely, especially Lieutenant Fuchs with APD, to do what we can to support our businesses, and prosecuting these kinds of charges, you know, is a really important piece of it. I did want to mention one final thing. We are having some staffing changes. You may be aware that Steve Rebuffo, Director of the Port, is retiring. And so tomorrow is his last day. And I also am sorry to say that Farina Brown is relocating. And so this is her last week, I believe, as well. So we will miss both of them.
Thank you. Sad to hear Farina's gone, but understand. Okay, any more questions for the mayor? Thank you, Mayor, for being here for the report. And we'll move on. Chair to the clerk now.
Thank you. So my two big updates for today are that last time Jasmine reported to you that we had 2 applications for initiative petitions. Since then, one of those has been denied and the other one was approved. And so that one is out on the street. It is to amend the charter for the position of Inspector General. And then the other thing is that I am working with the Department of Law on an RFP, and the council is also working with the Department of Law on an RFP for code publishing. Our current Muni code, they update the online code. We have to wait 3 months. We have to wait. We can submit once a quarter, so we can submit once every 3 months, and then it takes them 3 months to get it online. So we can potentially be 6 months behind with our online code. And your favorite words, in Kenai, I know that that there's better options out there. And so I think that even the planning department would greatly appreciate something that could be a lot faster than 6 months. So anyway, it's Department of Law had the contract. We are potentially switching it to the clerk's office, but it's not a hostile takeover. We are all working together. And then the last thing is we have hired a election assistant / comms person down for the election team. It is Krista. I can't think of her last name. She is from Reprographics. So if you ever work with Reprographics, Krista is working on the election team now. So she started officially on Monday. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Jamie. A quick question on the petition. What's the timeline? You have that information
They have 90 days to collect signatures.
from, when was it approved?
The 7th or the 8th. I think that I sent them the email on the 7th, and
90 days from July 8th.
but they picked it up on the 8th.
So
Like I
roughly,
sent it late in the day on the 7th, so the 8th triggered the first day.
roughly the first week of October.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? All right, we'll pivot to legislative services.
Thank you. Just a couple, we've been keeping you updated with most of our projects. We've been working a lot on Munification, the 50th anniversary of the municipality, and have a website that will launch soon and some fun events planned between September and early November for that. Allie has done a lot of work to set up a website for the AR 2025-74 with all the different S versions so that the public can follow along as those things change. And then Heather recruited a great group of youth applicants for the youth rep. And so you do have 5 that you'll be doing a meet and greet with in August. And then finally, in the next couple weeks, I'm going to be sending you some documents to help prep for the budget. Next week, I'll send you an update to the Cheers Anchorage with some budget information on the alcohol tax. And then I will also send you information that we got last year on the CIP, the capital improvement plan and budget, so you can review that before budget season starts. And then Allie will have a longer presentation from us today on communications.
All right, thank you. And then we'll hear from Law, our friends in the Assembly Council.
Yes. Thank you. So I've started for this Rose Comedy doing sort of a productivity report, so you can see what kind of workload we've been handling here at the Assembly Council's office, mostly for legislation. And I just pulled it up. So excuse me. We have through, I guess, for the month of June, we produced 6 AOs and 2 ARs, and the month of July 1. We haven't had a meeting yet in July, that was a gives time. But year to date, it's 35 AOs and 10 ARs produced from our office. And then we had 14 floor amendments for June. 0 new laid on the table items, 6 supplemental laid on the table items. And the year-to-date floor amendments, we've had 47, including our special meetings. 87, and 10 laid on the table items that were new items. And for year-to-date, 24 supplemental laid on the table items. The numbers aren't really give a clearer picture of how much work it is, because some are like very simple and some are huge, but they are all one number. We have in our queue now for July or going forward 14 ordinances we're working on, and 2 resolutions, and 4 legal opinions and research. And I want to put in a little plug and appreciation for having a summer intern this year, Zachary Christie. He's been really helpful to research some of our questions, and hopefully I'm giving him a great, well-rounded, robust experience. And so I guess that's about all I have.
All right, thank you.
Anything, Matthew?
Dean felt really left out with all the floor amendments that happened while he was gone. So I'll be on leave next week. So if you want to pile on him. He'd really
Balance the
appreciate it.
scales, balance the scales. Throw something on them. I guess also before our next meeting, Rules Committee, there is the AEDC luncheon. I think that they're trying to fill a table for those who are interested in attending. And so please reach out to Legislative Services if you want to participate in that activity. And otherwise, yeah, there's going to be some fun leadership change ups over the next two meetings, two regular meetings. And so stay tuned for that. And of course, Aaron, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. What was the first lunch thing? I didn't quite catch that.
AEDC, Anchor Jack
Oh,
Island Development Corporation,
AEDC,
does their
okay.
annual forecast luncheon, and there's a table, I think it's August 8th, for folks who wish to attend, get on the list. That way we know the table is full, and if we need more, we can secure it. So, yeah. Okay, so then that is going to move us to the first item on the agenda, Anna, constituent communication tips.
Yeah, and this will be brief. And I know communications is the theme. So I don't know if somebody can pull up my presentation. So the thought with this is it's communication, but it's also, mostly for, I guess, new members benefit, but thinking about the kinds of things that come through our inbox frequently and then what to do with them. And then maybe just some general tips. So we can go to the next slide. So we do get a lot of emails, but you'll probably find that they tend to be grouped in a few areas. So street maintenance, traffic calming, questions about taxes, building safety, permitting issues, everything from I'm trying to deal with the department and I'm having trouble there to there's this pothole on my street to just, I'm having this issue, I don't know where to go. So a lot of times I feel like, at least in my experience, our role is really traffic control, helping somebody find where they need to go, elevating it. And then sometimes, it carries a certain weight when you are emailing as an assembly member. And so, helping folks lean in and get that solved. Next slide, please. So I had my aide. So thanks again to my aide, Caleb, for putting this together. We worked on kind of just some common scenarios and where to send them. So this is really just meant to be as a reference. I won't read every word here, but if you're having an issue with the street, one thing that I found as a resident is you can call that number there, the drainage issue. And let's say you've got a backed up storm drain in the spring, they'll come by within about 48 hours or, a few days to clear it. So there's kind of ways to really easily solve those things. But just in general, I think it's a good resource to call the street maintenance number, either leave a message or you get someone live. And then if you're talking about a big kind of road project, you can tell street maintenance about it, but really it's probably something that needs to be a capital project. And so getting in touch with our CIP coordinator, Chelsea Ward Waller, project management engineering, just kind of knowing where to steer folks, or just to reach out on folks' behalf and say, hey, I'm forwarding this email. I got a question from a constituent. Can you please put this on the list? And then of course I put the snow hub for when we have snow again. Next slide. Potholes. So you can call the street maintenance, but we also have this pothole hotline, and they have been out patching pretty regularly. Disclosure, that's in front of my house, but Wisconsin street has been deteriorating over the years. So that's another thing just to point people to, in addition to saying, I will help you solve that problem, but also like getting these numbers out there so people know where to call. And I know these are on the website as well. Next slide. Speeding and traffic calming. That's a big one. I think the important thing here, if you're not already aware, is there is a whole process for it. And in fact, I went to the traffic calming website and I found that flow chart diagram because basically it involves going to the community council. There needs to be a traffic study. It's not something that we can just push through the system and get traffic calming on our own. And I've told many people this over the last couple of years. But the recommendation there is really go to this you can find the process on that website, but really go to your community council and get a resolution passed to move things through that process. So that's another one that commonly comes up. And I know everybody wants a speed hump on their street tomorrow, but that's why this process exists, so that there's a prioritization and it's not really the assembly's call where they go. So that's another common issue. Next slide. There aren't too many of these. I should say also, we worked on this 2 months ago and now I don't remember what, it's okay. So taxes, I know that comes up because everybody's property taxes are due over the summer. So you'll hear frustration about how high they are, questions about exemptions, or really just like, hey, my taxes are late, where do I go? Or I don't like the answer that I got from the Treasury Department, which can be a challenge. But it really refer people to the Treasury Department, to that website. Because again, a lot of times people are frustrated about stuff that is a pretty clear process in terms of late fees or late, fines, things like that. So, and if they just have questions about, I just sold my property or I have some complex tax question, I would encourage them to go to that department. So that's another common one that comes up. Next slide, please. Public safety, I think we know this one. I just put it up there. There's the emergency line, there's the non-emergency line. You can also contact the police department, the fire department. Health department has a lot of good information as far as animal control, environmental health, right? And I know these are all issues we've talked about, but just really helping people route to the various departments, because a lot of times people just don't know, or they default to calling 911, or they think that the police handles all those things. But, if it's animal control, that needs to go to that part of the health department. So those are another kind of common set of issues. Next slide. Building safety. So a lot of times we get, there's squatters at this property, there's a nuisance property. And I know these are all things we've talked about in a policy perspective. But code enforcement is complaint driven. So you have to send a complaint in for them to go look at it. And so that's an important thing to really empower people, if there is an issue, to report it. And ANC Works, you can actually look up properties in there. If you search a report, you can see if there's a bunch of code violations from before, or maybe a bunch of investigations that happened and they didn't find a violation. So if you know of a property that's causing a lot of issues, I would also maybe check it out on ANC Works and see what's already there, because that also can speak to kind of how long it's been an issue, because I think we've all dealt with that. And of course, we know vacant and abandoned properties, big issue. We have limited tools, but we have some. Next slide. Development and permitting. This one, again, we've dealt with a lot. But I would also say, not just on this topic, but I've dealt with a few of these where maybe there's a dispute. So you're getting in the middle of something, and you may not realize it right at the beginning. You're getting in the middle of something that they've been trying to do for a long time, and you're just the latest person to hear about it. There could be an active dispute where they didn't like the answer they got, or really that, you could be in the middle of what they're going to turn into a lawsuit, and they're kind of fishing for information. And I say that not because everybody has bad motives, but you just always have to think about, when am I getting brought into this, and what are they seeking from me? So, so the general kind of approach I found with these is, well, one, if they mention a lawsuit, I would proceed with caution. But even if they don't do that, I would ask for more information. If you're not clear, ask for, who you've already talked to. And then a lot of times what I'll do is I don't necessarily do a reply all and put the staff member that I'm talking to on the email, because I'm also sensitive to putting line item or line level staff in the middle of, something, and all of a sudden the assembly member's emailing, and it just can become kind of an issue. So I would also recommend connecting with staff, and I don't want to filter information too much, right? But just kind of using some discretion about, when you put our staff in that situation, and kind of what you share back, because sometimes you can also get a little more information, or you might get some context that initial person didn't disclose to you. So just use some discretion there, and just be aware that sometimes there are, pending lawsuits, or just be cautious. Next slide. Parks. I know, again, these are things we've dealt with, but it's really thinking about something where it's a maintenance issue that needs attention, like a, trail, part of the trail that's crumbling or whatever, versus I really want to do a project, or something bigger. It's that question of, is it a future improvement, or is it just solving an immediate problem? And one thing I'll flag, I don't know where they are in their cycle now, but Anchorage Park Foundation does community challenge grants. Those are really great ways for community councils, for neighbors. You could do a project on your own. You could raise the money. You could get a bunch of folks together, and the Park Foundation is happy to help you with that. So that's another thing. I think Mr. Bowen.
Just while we're on this, because we still have our new chief of staff in the room, one of the things that we've talked about in the past, actually I think a lot at this particular committee meeting, Number one, just kind of doing a check-in on how the CIP projects are prioritized. And I think we actually have a work session about that coming up soon, or some type of briefing from Ms. Ward-Weller. I'm not sure. But the other thing, the nomination process for capital projects, right now it's very community council driven, which is good, but we also have talked a lot about bringing in other groups. How can other stakeholders nominate various projects in a meaningful way and get them potentially programmed? So just planting that. Thanks.
I'll actually riff on that a little bit before you go, Suzanne, that we did discuss coming up with a kind of a generic project nomination form somewhere at PM&E that can be shared with the public. So it's not just filtered through the community council. So there's an alternative place, because community councils tend to be a bit of an insider's club at times. And so that's one thing. And the second thing, since you're here, I don't know that we have yet formalized a truly functional process or had meaningful discussions on the CASA process, the CIP process, and we haven't talked about it. So I want to make sure it's high on your list, because as we move into the budget season, that was kind of the most conflicted part of the budget process, or at least the most kind of divisive. And it would be really nice this year if we get to the point, like we've asked for almost 2 years, for that process to be effective, and hear from ARTSA, hear from LRSAs, et cetera. And so that's a really good project. I know Ona and they all know that, but I just don't know if they know how sensitive it is.
Yeah, first on the sort of opening the door into the CIP, I think the mayor's office would support that for all the reasons that you stated, and Chelsea probably is I believe Ona told me that they already are having some conversations about that. Also on CASA, yes, we have discussed bringing back the meeting of the LRSAs. The mayor very much wants to bring all the LRSAs together. So we'll do that this fall, but also on the CASA list, pretty sure Bill Falsey is going to be the lead on that piece, working with Ona. So, and
just
yes,
to make it really clear, it's
understand.
not just the LRSAs, and that was the problem in the first place.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that we want to have a meeting with the LRSAs, not that that would be the only group that we would be talking to about CASA, but
Because
for many of the LRSAs.
which is great. And if a nomination list comes through that doesn't reflect both interests of ARTSA and LRSAs, then we're back to the same point of it's not going to be fun or good or unanimously supported. And so the goal is to make sure both sides of that coin, the payer and the kind of the beneficiary. Thanks. Other questions or inputs, or do you have more slides?
Just a couple.
Yeah, and then, okay, sorry, I did go back because it's been a while since I made this. So again, when you're in doubt, check ANC Works. It actually has a fair number of reporting things. I mentioned street maintenance, I mentioned potholes, it's got noise complaints, I can see there, code enforcement. So I would really encourage folks to use that because it does route to a number of different places. So that's always a good thing to reference. And then last slide, if you go to the next one. I'm just reiterating what I already said. When in doubt, start with questions. Again, I want to emphasize, if there's a legal issue, I would advise getting advice on that. And if it mentions active litigation, definitely get some advice before you respond, because you don't want to inadvertently be part of a lawsuit. And again, because, we usually don't have a role in those, even though I can see why somebody would seek our advice or seek some advocacy from their assembly member. So yeah, so it's not so much about the how to communicate, it's more the what we're communicating, but those are items that I've seen come through my inbox a lot. And so that's mostly just some good references for other folks and some numbers and emails to use. Thanks.
All right, I'm gonna flip the agenda briefly and let Ally go next, which is all things newsletter, press release, communications. Ally.
Fantastic. A couple, oh, thank you. Thanks, Claire. A couple of weeks ago, I suppose it was probably months ago now, we had a conversation in rules about how assembly members can work with legislative services and what we have to offer. But I think one of the interesting things to come out of that conversation was really thinking about, as assembly members, how you can be planning both the legislative process and a communication strategy, and recognizing where they're intertwined, and there are lots of great opportunities to bring the community and stakeholders along with you as you develop your legislation. And that is the point of today's presentation. I've got 10 minutes. One of my favorite things about City Nerd Night is that we pressure Anchorage locals to give a presentation in 7 minutes. So I'm starting a 7-minute timer, and we're going to see if it works. To take a step back, first, I wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page about the Legislative Services Office. We do have our strategic plan one-pager that was included in today's materials, and we are a strong but mighty team that sees ourselves as a connector and a link between you all as a body and our community. And we believe that local government works best when residents are engaged. We've developed over the last few years a communications ecosystem, and there are components of that ecosystem that we manage and are super familiar with, those being the website, email newsletters, press releases, et cetera. And there are also a number of strategic additions. So today I'm talking mostly about that ecosystem and ways that you can strategize with it, recognizing that there are also lots of great add-ons and cool things that we can do together. For legislative services part, the work that we do is nonpartisan. We are not taking a position on the issues. We are here to connect the public and educate them on the legislative process and what's happening. And that means that we believe in attribution. We give credit and put people first. If you are running an ordinance, your name is on it. And we recognize that the legislative process can be confusing or maybe intimidating to access. And so that's part of the reason why we take on a real neighborly voice and welcome people into the business of the city. So looking at the legislative life cycle, we're going to go through this life cycle graphic. So this is a quick snapshot of the whole thing in full, but of course, everything starts in some way, shape, or form with an idea. Typically, that idea jumps into legislative drafting at some point in the game. That idea could come from someone else. It could come from your own brain. Who knows? But at some point, you're putting pen to paper. You're pulling things together. And at that time, there's a lot that legislative services can do to support you. We can bring people together and help manage the project. Jennifer Venneklausen provides research and policy analysis, and then we support across the branch, making sure that all the people that need to be involved are involved. And then if you'd like to work with the department, we can bring those in. We've done task forces and work groups and all kinds of good things. But this is really, for my part, where I want you to be thinking about a communications plan. As early as the idea comes up, I want you to be thinking about audience and what your message is. What is the problem that you are trying to solve? It happens as early as capturing your idea and putting pen to paper. So at some point, you've got legislation and it's ready to be introduced. This is a great time to be thinking about a press release, leading with your messaging. What is the thing that you are trying to accomplish? Then if you tag us for a press release, it's pretty quickly that we'll pull that into the website with some kind of website update. There are a number of assembly focus pages that are based on your work plan. So they're tackling some of these bigger topics and trying to help pull information across lots of different committees and meetings and work sessions and pull it all in one place for people to learn about. But that's not necessarily that to say that these are one and the same, right? That you have to have a press release to have website information or content, that kind of thing. And then for some of the more substantive pieces of legislation, we go as far to have a community engagement plan. And that starts talking about presenting with groups and tracking media coverage and being really intentional about that from the beginning. After the item has been introduced, there is a period of information gathering. That is the legislative process. You're hearing from constituents and people who are interested in that issue. And you're also doing the outreach to engage people in the conversation that ultimately evolves the legislation. So that can include presentations. You've seen an example of those branded presentations, and we often help members develop those presentations. Those presentations could be to community organizations, or they could be to your colleagues in the body through a committee or a work session. Again, if there's a community engagement plan, we provide that coverage on the plan. So we keep monitoring it and help you connect with people in the community. And then during the information gathering process, that's also a great time to request a newsletter spotlight or to get some more attention through email content. And then assembly action, the big show. It's your big moment. If you are looking towards anticipated action, if you as a sponsor are feeling like, all right, this is moving through the process, the public hearing is closed, we've got amendments, we've got S versions, it's all happening. Perhaps you want to circle back with a press release and say, ahead of the public hearing, this is my intent, or this is what we're doing. Sometimes those sponsor statements illuminate to the public what your intention is as a sponsor. That could be to postpone an item indefinitely or to continue the public hearing. So that it's a great pre-moment to get your message out there. And again, have that message attributed to your voice. Also ahead of assembly actions, we work really hard on Mondays and Tuesdays before an assembly meeting to make sure that the website is updated and that all of the versions that are in play are available and that that's really clear. And then you might know that there's a what's ahead section of the assembly newsletter that forecasts what's ahead. And typically we're drawing items from the agendas that relate to your work plan, and that's how they get elevated to the what's ahead section. And then post-action, something has happened and you get to enjoy the shade, enjoy the canopy of the legislation that has bloomed. Post-action, another great opportunity for a press release. And typically if we've done a press release ahead of an action, then I'll work to have a post-action press release. But sometimes there are topics that, and especially when we're in the room with the media, we know what they're covering and a press release isn't warranted. So then a press release might be focused on something that went quietly through the meeting, right? Or something that didn't get the attention that you wanted it to have. You can elevate it with a press release that way. Website updates, newsletter, recent action. So that's the behind the scenes look. And in July, we're piloting running our meeting newsletters the same week as the assembly meeting. So getting that news out more quickly after the meeting. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you all how that is going and if it's something that's worth continuing into the future. And then finally, if there is a community engagement plan, we do a lot of work to tie the loose ends on that, capture all of the media coverage that you've gotten, make sure that all of the information about where you've been presenting or workshopping your idea is all encapsulated, and that ultimately is submitted as an AIM after the fact. So it's attached to your legislation. This is how much work you all put into this and how much community engagement was a part of the process. So there are a couple of examples that I've linked here. Oh, and I went 7:30. That's too bad. So in sum, and maybe the launch point for any questions or comments that you all would like to make, these are really my takeaways for you. One is that you are the architect. You are the policymaker. This is your legislation and it is your journey to carve out. We're here to support, but we are following your lead. We serve all 12 of you. So there's a lot of work to be done. But also it's a testament to this is not one size fits all, right? What worked for one piece of legislation might not be the strategy or approach that you want to use for your next. It's an art and it's not a science. And the art is a lot of fun. And the well is deep. So we're here to help you cover the basics so that you have a lot to draw from as you dive deeper into the work in your community. And when it comes to those add-ons, like we love to experiment and get creative and play around with you. And so all of those are on the table. Ultimately, this presentation and this handout with like the notes section, I want you to have as a reference material. So when you're strategizing your legislative process, you can be thinking about some of the tools that Legislative Services has available to intersect with the legislative process as it moves forward. Thank you.
So I have just a little bit to add on there. We had a lengthy discussion yesterday among the leadership team about the fact that members do have a right to put their messages out, but the official communications have limits because the code provides we cannot use municipal resources for partisan or political purposes. And that always kind of rubs up against members when they have something they want to say. And so there is an ongoing discussion about how to put together kind of some structure around what are the limits that members will face when trying to utilize these systems for the purpose of expressing their opinion on certain matters. You would always be free in your own kind of social media spaces in the world to talk to any reporter in any way you want, or member of the public, or through your emails. And so we don't have a clearly defined process right now for helping people to understand. It kind of gets back to that, you know it when you see it, where there's a line and we have to be careful of it. And so that's kind of part two of this conversation coming later. All of this is on point, and that's just the only caution that I add, that there's some care and attention that will be requested of members on their sponsor statements, so as not to be overtly political or partisan in such a way that it falls outside of the code. So thank you. All right, the next series of items on the agenda are going to start with just a brief discussion on kind of the engagement with the public through the process of public hearings and audience participation. The next one will be a training on points of order. And then the next one will be a kind of a discussion on the rules of decorum. New members, new process, new understanding of how things work. It's helpful to have some understanding of how and why we do the things that we do. And so there's a little handout here, and it basically says the Anchorage Assembly follows a specific and intentional approach to public testimony during public hearings and audience participation, grounded in the principles of fairness, decorum, and effective governance. While Assembly members may ask clarifying questions or fact-finding questions, we avoid engaging in debate or broad questioning of members of the public. And the practice is guided by the following principles. What we want to do is preserve the integrity of the public testimony. Their testimony is not an opportunity for us to debate members of the public. So it's designed for them in a safe and open forum to express their opinions. Engaging in debates has an interesting power structure when you're sitting up on that dais and members of the public aren't, and it will discourage participation, particularly from individuals who are uncomfortable or less prepared for rhetorical exchanges. Next, it also is intended to ensure equal access and fairness, where some members might want to debate a member of the public for 10 minutes. Everyone gets 3 minutes as we're going through the public hearing process. And if there's something germane from the member of the public, once the public hearing closes and they're there, you can call them up and ask them that question during that time. But extended interactions with certain testifiers can unintentionally create an imbalance in offering some individuals more time and attention than others, and limiting our questions to brief and clarifying inquiries ensures that all voices are heard equitably. Next is the effort to maintain professional decorum. The Assembly Chamber is a forum for structured, respectful, civic debate. Debate during testimony can blur the lines between public input and policy deliberations, potentially undermining the decorum expected in formal proceedings. Also, separating testimony from deliberation. The legislative process proceeds in stages. We listen, we evaluate, we decide. Public testimony is the listening phase. Deliberation among Assembly members occurs later and is informed by the full record of the public input. And finally, avoiding perceptions of bias or hostility. Engaging in debate or challenging public testimony may give the impression of defensiveness or partisanship. Maintaining a neutral posture during public testimony helps to promote public trust and reinforces our role as impartial decision makers. This framework safeguards the dignity of all who choose to participate and supports the Assembly's commitment to transparent, respectful, and equitable legislative process. Of course, we're people, and it's a human process, and sometimes it gets out of line, or your reaction is more than it should be. A question gets asked that is in that debate. And so this is just to really communicate to folks that the purpose of the public hearing isn't to debate and engage. If there are gray areas you need an answer to, that is a fine question, but the purpose of that is to be hearing the public, and after that, debate under the rules. And so that's the first part of this kind of 3-part discussion. The next part is, if there are any questions, I think that's pretty straightforward. The next part is on points of order. Should we do points of order first, or do your kind of presentation first? What do you think? Why don't we do the rules of decorum discussion, and then afterwards do the points of orders training? The points of order training is intended to provide new members the opportunity to play with the concept of points of order, because making a point of order is not a bad thing, but people are often hesitant to do it because they're afraid, what does this mean? And they don't know how. And so we want to create a process here by which members can kind of practice some of those things and get over any sense of it's weird to do this. But first we'll start with Matt's discussion on the chamber's rules of decorum. There was a discussion at our last meeting in which a member of the body made a fair inquiry when a member of the public was being very loud and very aggressive in their testimony. Well, isn't this outside of our rules of decorum that this member of the public is talking mean about us? And so we wanted to have a discussion a bit along the lines of there's a difference between what the public says and our rules for ourselves. And so rather than me make that discussion, I've asked our attorney to help us kind of investigate the First Amendment speech and debate. Matthew.
All right, thank you very much. So this is going to be fairly informal, much like during new member orientation, if I can harken you back to that. So if you have questions at any point, please feel free to get the attention on the chair or just shout over me, because that's cool too. All right, so what we're going to be talking about today is the First Amendment, which is the big reason why the rules are different for the public than they are for you, right? And when I'm going to talk about the First Amendment, we generally are referencing freedom of speech, which the First Amendment's a reference to the federal Constitution, as you all know, right? This language here, that Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech, but it also is ensconced in our Alaska Constitution under Article 1, Section 5. And additionally, I believe it's Section 7, which encompasses the right to petition the right for redress of grievances, similar to the language from Amendment 1. The thing I like about the Alaskan Constitution is that it has that being responsible for abuse of that right in there, right? Like, it's like, hey, you can run your mouth, just don't come crying to me, which I love. Like, so, which is kind of like, this is the takeaway that most people have, right? I can say whatever I want because the First Amendment says I can, which isn't actually the case. I hate to be the one to break it to you, right? Like, I'm going to hit you with like some law nerd stuff, and I'll explain it briefly. But there is a scale of government regulation, right, that the Supreme Court uses anytime it looks at the regulation of somebody's fundamental right. What's the government interest being protected, and what's the means that the government is using to protect that government interest at the expense of an individual right? There's not going to be a test on this. You're lucky. But there's basically 3 levels of scrutiny that go into any First Amendment analysis: minimum scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, and strict scrutiny. Minimum scrutiny, also called the rational basis test, the government regulation almost always survives, right? I can think of probably one case off the top of my head where a government law failed the rational basis test. It had no legitimate government interest in the regulation being enforced. Strict scrutiny, on the other hand, government's got to have a compelling interest, and it has to have the most narrowly possible tailored way of achieving that interest in order for it to survive. So it's very rare that something survives strict scrutiny. So if you're the government, you want it to be the minimum scrutiny. If you're the person whose rights are being regulated, you want it to be strict scrutiny that they get. All right, all that is to say, there's a lot of questions we have to ask. Is it actually speech? If it is speech, is it protected speech? Which you're going to ask, who's the speaker? Where are they speaking? What are they saying? Who's attempting to deregulate what's being said? All that plays into what regulation is permissible. All right, so the first question, is it speech? Anybody know who this is? I'll be astounded if you do. This is Gregory Lee Johnson. Anybody want to guess what he got arrested for in 1984 in Dallas, Texas? Burning a flag, correct answer. That's my amen corner right there, member of Presbyteria. Yeah, he got arrested for burning a flag in 1984 at the Republican National Convention. And this is a great case about symbolic speech, because one of the first things the Supreme Court had to address is burning a flag speech, right? He's not saying anything, he's burning a flag. But the government found that it is, right? Or the court found that it is. When the First Amendment comes into play, are you intending to convey a message? I don't like America. And is it likely that I'll understand that? Yes. And we actually have this principle reflected in the Anchorage Municipal Code in a very little addressed portion that says you can use your 3 minutes for silent protest. And it's been done in the past. I've seen it on YouTube. Chris remembers, I'm sure. Yeah. But there are people who just get up and give you the staring contest for 3 minutes. And that's fine. That is a legitimate form of speech, even though it's what we tend to think of as the antithesis of speech. So just because somebody's not speaking doesn't mean that they're not speaking. Yeah.
So what's the difference between that and speech that isn't germane?
We will get to that, correct? Yes. Somebody got the teacher's edition. We will get to yes, we will get to germane. I appreciate that question. So put a pin in that and you'll see where it comes back up. The next question is, once it's speech, is it protected speech? Because believe it or not all speech is protected. Again, in that big spectrum we showed, right? There's minimal government regulation or minimum scrutiny and strict scrutiny. If the government's regulating unprotected speech, that's going to get minimum scrutiny because it's not protected, right? So when we say what's unprotected speech, it's the things like defamation, true threats, criminal threats, incitement to imminent lawless action, fighting words, like you're trying to provoke, take a shot at me. I dare, like the principal in the Breakfast Club, right? Hit me, you know you want to hit me, right? Right? That's fighting words, right? That's not protected speech. Or obscene, valueless material appealing to the prurient interest. And that's the classic Miller v. California definition of, obscenity. You don't know it when you see it. You can't define it, but you know it when you see it. This picture right here, does anybody know where that is? Thank God, because if he'd said like, that is Clarence Brandenburg, final answer, I know it 100%, know him, I might as well. This is Clarence Brandenburg apparently borrowing his like son's Klan robe because he's got his at the cleaners or something, and because it doesn't fit. It always drove me nuts looking at this picture. But that's the Brandenburg v. Ohio case. And the question in that case was whether or not him swearing revengeance, end quote, against the federal government constituted incitement to imminent lawless action. And that's the thing, like, we has to be like, I'm really trying to start a riot right here, right now. Just like making a vague threat against the government, even though it's obnoxious, still protected speech. Which brings me to my next point, protected speech. First Amendment is its core political speech is at its zenith. So we're going to get the strictest possible scrutiny we can when somebody is engaging in political speech. So the court is going to be really skeptical of government regulation, even when that speech is offensive, right? Could stir dissatisfaction or stir people to anger, right? Unrest, these things, like even though you may be offended by it, it may be quite despicable to you, unless it's really crossing the line into fighting words or trying to incite lawless action right here, right now, offensive language can still be protected and frequently is. So that's going to lead us to the question then, who is the speaker, right? Which, this is my example. Is this the same as anybody know the guy on the, who's the guy on the right first? That's the easy one. It's the mayor from Jaws, yes! 50th anniversary, thank you. Right? Yeah, I know, man. I would have killed to have had you guys in 401. Yeah, so Mayor Larry Vaughn, right? He's the mayor of Shark City in Jaws. Like, he's the mayor of Amity. This is a parody of a Norman Rockwell picture from 1943, right? Freedom of speech. Like, it's based off of a person from Arlington, Vermont, who was the lone dissenter at a city council meeting about a new proposed tax. It's actually his next door neighbor who modeled for him. But that's the real difference here. And the reason I have that as the example is there's a difference between the citizen and the mayor, right? Because freedom of speech, the First Amendment protects the public from you, not you from the public. And congratulations on your election. You are all now the man. You are the government. When you are up on the dais or when you're speaking from your official position, you are now the government. And so with that, your legislative power, it brings with you certain legislative immunity, which is awesome, but it also brings with it the ability for your legislative body to regulate itself. Your ability to speak, how you speak, what you say, your ability within Robert's rules to attack or not attack a person's argument, but not their motive or personally. That's what's going to govern, because you are flexing power that is derived from the people, and it's not your personal rights at stake. So that's why the Anchorage Municipal Code is what's going to govern your actions, or Robert's rules are what's going to govern your actions at the assembly meeting. What you can say, what you can't say, the modes of arguments that are in line, the modes of arguments that are out of line. right? It's not the same for Norman Rockwell's next door neighbor, right? That's a citizen. The First Amendment's going to apply to him, and the government or the court has said that at a city council meeting, this is what we call a limited public forum, right? It's a public forum in that you can exercise your right to freedom of speech here, but it is limited to what is being discussed to a certain topic. So when we're having public testimony on AO, whatever, right? That's where germane comes in. Member Volland. Yes.
My question is,
Mhm.
okay, so somebody can get up, and I'm not trying to say I have a strong perspective on this either
Sure.
way, but it's just interesting to me that somebody could get up and be speaking off topic,
Mhm.
and that's not germane.
Right.
But somebody could get up and not speak and use their whole 3 minutes in silence. How is that germane?
Okay. So if somebody spoke and went on, that's a great question. So the question is, how is silent protest how is that germane? Because we have recognized through established practice that when somebody stands up and doesn't say anything and just gives you the stank eye for 3 minutes, that's protest of your current action, right? It's understood by everybody that like, okay, whatever I'm doing right now, you're not a fan of it, right? It's the same way that like when you're like misbehaving in the school play and you make eye contact with your mom or dad and they just stare at you, right? It's like, I understand that my current conduct is disapproving to you, Dad. Sorry. Straighten up, right? It's the same sort of concept. So we have recognized, and that's one of the reasons I think we put it in code, that we're like, hey, if you get up and just stare at us, we understand that to mean you're protesting whatever's the proposed action is. How am I doing on time? Okay, cool. So that's where germane, the question of whether or not something is germane comes in. All right. You're subject to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. You can speak at this podium. You have to give us your name. You only have 3 minutes if it's you talking personally, but you can only talk on this topic. So during public testimony on a certain AO, it's the AO. During public comment at the end of the assembly, it has to be a matter of public concern. You can still be not germane. We're very loosey-goosey at the end of the meeting, but if somebody wants to get up and talk about how Chris like stole his girlfriend when he was in high school because he drank too much SoCo, like that's not public, right? And that was just not that happened to anybody senior year.
I want to jump in there real quick
Sure.
and talk briefly about this in a slightly different context. So the reality is it's tricky for us to enforce this part of the process because you can have a speaker who talks word salad and then just mentions the content of the ordinance and it feels like it lands within the four walls of the boundary of this topic of a limited forum and they're on point. So that's one thing. A person could be also talking wildly in kind of their own made up language and or describing personal traumas, and members are hesitant to speak up in those moments because the process of having a point of order and asking for compliance and all of that stuff might be more trauma and time than would be saved bringing compliance. But we have kind of a general principle that we should, if a member recognizes it is off topic, make the point of order and get the work done because we want to fairly apply the rules equally. And so it's a fine process, fine meaning detailed, nuanced, challenging to understand how to engage in this part of it. Particularly challenging for the leadership to know where the bounds are, but know that we internally as a body, historically, as long as I've been around, have kind of had to balance that through some kind of, I don't know what to call it, but a reality check at the moment about, is it worth engaging anyhow? And sometimes it's ended up with police and like really awful, don't love that, but it is at some point necessary. So sorry, there's a little editorial.
No, that actually brings me to my next point, right? Like you are allowed content-based regulations that are viewpoint neutral and enforced that way, but the court has never really said like, oh, great. Well, what does that mean? Like, what is content neutral and what is that? How does that look in real life, right? The one thing we know from case law is that like using actual disruption as your basis is going to survive court challenge. The court said like actual disruption is a good standard to use. So someone at the podium can, even if they're on topic, can get to the point of causing a disruption, right? They can start flipping tables, they can start, but it doesn't even have to reach that point, right? They can just be, there's case law out there that says they can just be repetitive to the point of, or just rambling to the point of not making any sense. Like anything that would actually impede the legislative process can be considered a disruption, but it has to be an actual disruption. So if citing the previous example, the point of order that came up when somebody was talking was about attack, I believe discussing a person's motives or something like that. That probably, everything he was saying about motive was probably germane and well within his First Amendment rights to say. Now, if somebody said he's yelling too loud and it's disruptive to the process, that might have been a fair argument. The thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to tell you guys that, because you are a regulating body and you have to make that decision. The chair makes the ruling, and then it is incumbent upon the members to either appeal it or just go along with it, vote one way or the other. But the lawyers are not the ones who call balls and strikes here. That is the legislative body's position to make that ruling. So
Before you move on, Anna.
Yeah, and just to add, having watched a bunch of these meetings before I was here, another kind of common thing that I've seen where the actual disruption happens is not even necessarily someone saying something, is that they physically will not move away from the podium. They're not ceding the space. And I think that's often, it's, parallel to speech, but it is still really holding up the meeting because no one else can speak. They're basically holding onto the floor. And so I think that's another one where, and that is, I don't want to say common, but I'd say of the times that that's happened, I feel like that's often when security has to be called, when someone will physically not move away from that space because they're not allowing someone else to speak.
100%. Yeah. Refusal to cede the floor. Like when somebody's got a 10-minute speech and refuses and wants to read every word of it, like that's impeding your legislative process. And you have that is an actual disruption.
Cameron, and then Aaron.
So I just want to go back to something you said, because I want to make sure I'm understanding it. We have comment that's on topic and comment that's off topic, and it can be ruled that it's off topic. You have silence is considered protest. And then you have disruptive. Sound right so far? So, but if my comments off topic are intended to be protest, and so I am here to protest this, then anything I say under that sort of umbrella is allowed because it is within protest. So that's the piece I'm trying to understand is the protest piece and how we differentiate between somebody who is there intentionally. We've had many people come up. They're intentionally coming up there essentially to protest, and they don't know what to say. They don't know what's happening. So they're not speaking to the item. So and the ruling can be, you're not speaking to the item, you're not speaking to the item, and then they can be removed. But their intention is to protest it. I mean, that clearly, from my perspective. How do we differentiate off topic from protest?
I mean, the great part is y'all have to decide that, and I don't in the moment. It's going to be very fact based, and depending on how things go. I think with the silent protest, again, you've explicitly put that form of protest in code. And as a legislative body, by putting it in code, I would say that you have found that to not constitute a disruption, even if it does feel like a waste of your time. A previous assembly at some point found that it was an appropriate use of someone's time at the podium. Whereas if somebody wanted to get up and say, Jimmy crack corn and I don't care over and over again for 3 minutes, I think as a body, you would be well within your rights to find that disruptive and not germane and just wasting your time. So it's the clarity of the idea being communicated, I guess.
And I will add just a little bit of character to that the tradition is not to make an abrupt ruling. This is out of order, you are done. It's to help prompt them to get back on the point, right? And so there's generally speaking an opportunity to cure, for lack of a better word, get on point, go through the process. And so that's a fundamental principle. And then the reality is it's all a judgment call, and it's hard to know. And there are certain individuals who have made a practice of attempting to be disruptive, and that I think the chairs and the body have traditionally found is disruptive and is creating an actual disruption and it escalates, as opposed to an individual who comes forward and might be attempting to do, as you described, kind of just make a protest, not really knowing the way. And, the chair will generally prompt, please speak to the matter before us, and they will figure out a way to do that in most cases. And so to Matthew's point, it's a gray area, and ultimately it's up to 7 members of the body to answer that question in the moment based on those facts. Aaron?
I have a nerdy question and then a practical question. What is a nunc pro tunc disruption? That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I had to look that up too. I want to
Okay,
be like,
good.
oh yes, well, nunc pro tunc is a well-established legal, but it means now because of then. So somebody made a disruption earlier, so you're trying to cure it. Yeah, sorry, it's NUNs. I'm spelling for the.
Yeah,
translator.
I asked
Yeah.
Google and the answer I got was unsatisfactory, and that was much better. So thank you.
So yeah, try.
And
yeah.
then secondly, is this the basis for why, or the basis of disruption? Why we don't allow applause or other forms of expressions of support or opposition in the chambers?
So this is a really tough area, and there's not a whole lot of case law. There is case law that says that like the limited public forum, your First Amendment rights attach even when outside of the 3 minutes of public testimony, which is why we allow signs, because you're still allowed to express yourself, and this is classically core political speech. But I'm not disrupting anything, right? I've got a small sign. It's not blocking anybody else's view. I'm not impugning or infringing upon anybody else's rights. That's fine. The applause, yeah, that's it disrupts the proceeding. Like we lose control for a bit, like depending on how long it goes, like chanting, things like that. I remember in Virginia for a while there, it was really popular for people to do the ASL symbol for applause, and they would be up to you to determine whether or not that's actually disruptive. But usually, silent, visual, political expression that doesn't get in anybody else's way, it's hard to make an argument that really disrupts the proceeding.
I want to add a little bit to that. So back to what I started with, talking about preserving the integrity of the public testimony, hearing from the public. There was a dynamic, and part of this really evolved into a very firm policy through the pandemic, where a large majority in the room would essentially be shouting down and booing a minority in the room who suddenly was feeling uncomfortable to testify and had to face a gauntlet of aggressive opponents to be able to be heard by their government. And so part of this is to ensure that when the public is there to testify, the public can feel confident that they're not going to be harassed or threatened or jeered for standing up to speak and being heard, even if they're in the minority, a severe minority, and have a different opinion than the majority. And so some of those rules evolved around trying to ensure. So part of it is the timeliness factor. We have to enforce the rules so we can get through the business. It's a business meeting, but also part of it is to protect the minority and not just have a loud, aggressive majority controlling the tempo of the room for the night. So and I would note, Mr. Gerker is still in the meeting. He texts, Mr. Gerker is still here. He says, yeah, that's it. So I would note also for the record that at 1:51 p.m. Mr. President joined us, and at 2:24 Mr. Gerker joined us. So, and Jared, we're discussing kind of rules of decorum and First Amendment rights and that whole thing. It might be worthy of a look back if you get some time once the stream is posted, not all the meeting, but from about the midpoint on. So other questions, Anna?
Yeah, I think on the point of the applause too, I think all of what Chris said is valid. I think it's also really important to underline the business meeting piece and how it is fundamentally different than a town hall. Because I think especially there's the crowd mentality aspect of a town hall that can start to, I mean, what you're describing is it becomes a runaway train, but also just fundamentally you're sitting in the audience because you're an audience member. You're not an active participant in the meeting, except and only when you are up at the mic to speak. That's just how it is. And so I think that is really important. That is a really important line to hold, not because we don't want the public to participate, but there are very specific ways that you participate, and they are fundamentally different than a community council meeting, than a town hall, than any kind of, rally, any other kind of thing where you've got a number of people in a room. It really is important, I think, to hold that line.
Any other questions before we proceed? Go ahead, Matthew.
All right, and this was just my takeaway slide. Ultimately, the bottom line on both of them is this is enforced by the chair and the body as a whole. You have to make these rulings, and Dean and I are there to advise, but the assembly meeting is y'all's legislative proceeding, and your rules are what's going to govern, and your decisions are what's going to govern. So please don't look at us to call balls and strikes. And if there are any other questions, I'm happy to take them. Feel free to email or call.
The first part of this discussion was about kind of how members engage with the public through the public hearing process and at the end of the meeting. And the second part of this discussion is kind of on the First Amendment structure around the rules of decorum that we have in the chamber, how members engage with each other versus how the public engages with the body, and what rules we have which are limited in kind of enforcing any regulation on members of the public. The third part of the process, the fun part, which is a training on making points of order, because as a lot of new members come in, I think there's a lot of this not wanting to ruffle any feathers or cause anybody to be mad or whatever. And the reality is making points of order should be as natural as making a motion to approve, or maybe not as often, but as natural for members. So the idea is let's have a little bit of practice and discussion around these things so that we can start to burnish off any sense of you don't have a right to do this, and if you feel it, you should say it, is kind of the bottom line. And one thing to note, if you don't say it when it is happening and the ship sails, you have missed the boat, and the rules will say your point of order is not entertained anymore because that was yesterday's business. It was 5 minutes ago. And so there is a timeliness piece to this conversation to make sure new members are ready. Jamie.
Yeah, what Chris just said. And also now I'm all hyped up that this is going to be fun, and I have to follow that. So no promises. So there is no exhaustive list of what and point of order can be called on. It's essentially your rules of decorum. So anything in the code, anything in Robert's rules that isn't being followed can be a point of order, and it's based on the bodies. Some bodies are a little bit loose in their meetings and some are a lot more strict. I think ours are a lot more strict because we have a lot more public attending, and like community council meetings aren't quite so strict because they want the freedom of conversation, right? So some of them that I thought of, speaking to someone's motive, which comes up often. Another one, not seconding a motion. If you didn't hear somebody seconding a motion and we're moving on into debate, debate has gone on for longer than an hour, it means that your chair and your clerk are off their game. But if debate has gone on for longer than an hour, that's in the municipal code. If a member of the audience is creating an actual disturbance, like we just talked about, that's in the code. If members' comments are not germane to the subject under debate, that's under the code. If a member calls another member a liar during debate, that was a fun one. That's in Robert's rules. And another one, like we've changed the order of the day and the chair gets mixed up and goes to the next item rather than the item of the change the order of the day. Those are just a few of them. And so I have a few scenarios that I'm going to pass out, and then you guys can do your points of order, and then Anna and Chris can just do the chair piece, and they get to either agree with you or disagree with you, whatever their opinion is. And the questions that is what is your point of order, or what rule do you believe has been broken? So the member's going to call a point of order. You can interrupt a speaker. And then the chair is, the questions that they're going to ask is, what is your point of order, or what rule do you believe has been broken? And then you're going to state the rule that you believe has been broken, and then the chair has to rule on that. And then when we're done with the 3 scenarios, I just want to quickly run through appealing the decision of the chair.
She's doing this because she hates us. That's speaking to motive.
Yes. Okay, Aaron's is the fun one, so we'll start there.
Point of order.
A point of order has been raised. What's your point of order?
Member Soapbox Sam's comments are not germane to what is being debated today, Chair.
Can you read that again a little more slowly?
Member Soapbox Sam's comments are not germane to what is being debated. I don't know, is that supposed to be a real name?
It's fine. I want to make sure I didn't miss any information there. Having not had the benefit of hearing what he said because I wasn't paying attention, can you please refresh me on what it is you think specifically was out of order?
Absolutely, Chair. We are currently debating what is objectively the best flavor of cookie in the world, and Soapbox Sam has just started speaking about pies and cakes, which is not germane to the topic.
Because sometimes ice cream
Out of order.
Move to override the ruling of the chair.
Yeah, so we have some specific training on that too. So yeah, that's a tricky one. What do you think?
I think I guess it would somewhat depend on what he said. If he was saying, I don't like any kind of cookie, and he was trying to add to that debate, then possibly. If he was just going on about cherry pie and whatever other kinds of pie, then I think I could see a scenario where it would be out of order.
And so what I would do generally, much like the public when they're going off the rails, is I would offer to the member, rather than make a ruling, if that's okay, I would ask the member to speak more germanely to the point. If we can get there without an actual ruling, fine. But if it's so egregious that it is disrupting our ability to conduct our business, I would make the ruling and say, we're talking about cookies. So please bring it back. The point of order would be upheld. Okay, who's next? Zach.
Point of order.
What's your point of order, sir?
You just stated that item 14C is next, but we just changed the order of the day, and I believe item 14E is to be next.
Very hypothetical. Is that true, Madam Clerk? Okay. Well, the clerk assures me that that is true, so we'll go ahead and uphold the point of order, and we will take up the item as the order was amended to. Thank you. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question actually. Can you, Jamie, unpack because or maybe Chris too, the distinction between what you said, I'm not going to rule on this, but it was more of a soft ruling, like, hey, let's get back on track. What is because there is no assembly jail. I've said that before, right? So I guess maybe more of a stylistic thing. Like, what is the implication of actually making that order? Is it just that we're saying the member? Is it that they're admonished, or you know what I mean?
I think it depends. Go ahead, Jamie.
I think let's dive into the appeal from the decision of the chair. The body is the judge.
Yeah.
The body makes their own rules, and the body is the decision maker on the rules. So when the chair makes a ruling, the appeal from the decision of the chair is the body
Being the judge.
being the judge. And so if a point of order is called and the chair doesn't rule, and then the point of order can be called again, or by someone else, and then that sort of forces the chair to make a ruling, and then appeal from the decision of the chair is where the body gets to weigh in and be the judge. So the chair is going to make his best.
And I can say though,
Yes.
if you go down the road to the point where a decision is made and the member is not following the rules, and we're in the middle of a debate, and then what is your question? What happens? And I think that I have seen members start getting louder and louder and the microphones being turned off. I have seen the chair say, I'm sorry, we're moving on to the next speaker. You can get back in the queue if you have an opportunity to cool down. And I've seen some members say, you will not stop me. And then the debate gets stopped because we're going to take a break while this person goes through whatever it is they're going through. And so I think that ultimately the answer to that question is it's very limited. In much the same way when you have the crowd and the audience starting to cheer and rally and they really want to have a football game in the audience and they're mad when you tell them no, often the only answer is to walk away and come back when it's had a chance to detox kind of in the moment, kind of get back in order. And so the answer to the question really depends on the person and their willingness, their kind of honorability, if you will, in following and being a member of the body. So it's limited. We don't have somebody in jail. We talked about a sergeant at arms at one point, but the climate has changed, thankfully. Fair? Yeah, clerk nods. Who's next? Yarrow.
Point of order.
What's your point of order?
It appears the debate has gone beyond the 1 hour time limit set in code.
How are we, Madam Clerk?
We are beyond the hour time limit.
Can't believe you let that happen. So I would entertain the motion to extend the debate. And then, so it would uphold your point of order. Or, yeah, really it would be if we're not done debating. I would-
I'm opposed because I did not support this motion. I don't
Right.
want to.
And so that's where then it comes to a vote. And it's a debatable motion. And so it just becomes another little debate on the way to the races. And ultimately, do we want to extend? And now, of course, that's a 7-member vote, but a motion to extend the meeting is a supermajority, similar to the Lillian process. And so, yeah, I would uphold the point of order and we would then move on to the next motion, which is, do we extend debate? And if not, then the question is called. It's the unusual, it's Mr. Meyer's favorite motion, but without the 8-vote requirement because time has expired. And so it's really up to a simple majority. Go ahead. Anna.
Yeah, I think as I'm hearing these, I guess one reflection is really how much this is really, what it's driving to is what procedure we're using. So like you said, the formal point of order, there is a procedure for that. There's an appeal option. There's, you have to go to the end of it. Or like we had in a prior meeting where there was a question about whether there was a separate issue, but a vote count. We can't proceed, our procedure can't continue until we dispatch with that. And so I think that's the other implication, I guess, of these formal mechanisms. So we try to informally move forward, keep things moving, right? Like get to consensus or, but like you said, if you object, that is your right. And then it does trigger a much more formal procedure that we have to finish before we can move on. And so that's also just something to keep in mind. And there's reasons, like you said, if you oppose it, there's reasons why you may want to use that procedure. You don't just want to move forward.
Mr. Volin, yeah.
Okay, I have a scenario. A member of the audience is still speaking after 3 minutes and the chair can't get them to stop. Point of order.
What is your point of order, Ms. Wong?
The member of the audience is creating an actual disturbance.
And I would uphold the point of order and speak directly to the member of the public. You are creating an actual disturbance. If this continues, and we'll have to have you removed. Please come to order. Your time has expired. So I would uphold that. That one's easy.
And I just want to say for this one, if the chair is trying to get somebody to come to order and somebody calls a point of order, it's a lot easier for the chair to go down that road of the next step. I'll have to have you removed and then.
Right. And some of the process of this training is to empower you all to do the part. And right, I Mr. Gerker, who's on the phone, like when that very loud testifier was there and he made a point of order, but I couldn't hear anything in that chamber until about 2 seconds before that person's time was up. And at that point, although it may have been a point of order worth exploring, it was moot because the time had expired. So you have to find a way to be heard. And it's even fine if it's nuisance enough and it's loud enough to come and tap the chair on the back and say, hey, I want to do this. If I can't hear you and I'm managing and I can't have a chance to look at my phone, then however you get my attention is fine. Telephone game, number to number down the dais, whatever it needs to be. That's kind of a very important process because I didn't hear until it was too late. You have a question, Dana?
Well, I was just going to say, like, I think another scenario, this is a pretty obvious one, but there are times when the chair is multitasking and somebody yells out in the audience, and they've done it a couple times. That could also be a scenario where, another member is identifying who that person is to the chair.
Absolutely. And that has proven very important at certain points of time in the past. Other questions? Okay, let's move on to the appeals.
So we have an ordinance to fix that, but so right now the code says to overrule the decision of the chair. Well, Robert's rules doesn't want negative motions, and so you don't want to overrule the decision of the chair. And so in Robert's rules, the question is, I want to appeal the decision of the chair. And so then the question to the body is, shall the chair's decision be sustained? And so when you word it that way, then yes or no. So then yes, you should be
And I can give
sustaining
you,
the decision of the chair, or no, and then the chair's decision is overruled, and that
if the answer is no, I'll give you a practical reason why. And this isn't maybe for a lot of people germane right now, but if you frame it in the way that the code talks about right now, as I move to override the ruling of the chair, it actually gives the mayor position in the question because of the veto power. If you have to get affirmative votes to override the ruling of the chair, then if the mayor is opposed, it would require 8 votes. Now, there are some who would say that's administrative, but what I have found in the veto power, if it ever gets legislated, is the charter is very clear. The mayor has the veto power, and thus it's hard to argue otherwise. And so if you frame it in the way of shall the ruling of the chair be sustained, right? Then in order to override the chair, you need a majority of negative. Doesn't have a position in that, and so it's interesting that it's the member who moves to override.
You're saying. So let's say the member says, I move to override the ruling of the chair, or I move to appeal the ruling of the chair. Then it goes to the clerk to say, to frame it so that it needs the negative vote. So whether the member uses override or appeal, as long as the follow-up question is, shall it be sustained? That kicks off the negative votes. But is that you who does that, Jamie?
Yep. So shall the decision of the chair shall the ruling of the chair be sustained? In Robert's rules, the chair still manages the vote. In Robert's rules, the motion to appeal from the decision of the chair is debatable. Everybody can speak to it, I believe, once, but the chair can actually speak to it twice to defend. So,
And that's our procedures as well?
Well, we have incorporated Robert's rules, and
Mhm.
so we don't have anything speaking against any of this in our code.
And there is a code update coming to make it harmonious.
Okay.
It's just not quite there. It's a fuzzy area right now.
Now, are we, though, our current practices, is that a debatable motion? Are we doing oh, okay. And you get one take? I don't think we ever got to that point since I've been elected.
Yeah, it's one, yeah. And so then the chair is neutral, but they get to defend the reason why they made their ruling that way.
Mhm.
And so then everybody gets to say their piece of how they believe it should go, and then the chair can again say their piece to defend themselves or counter, like quasi judicial, like in proceedings, you state your case, the other side states their case, you state your case again, then then it automatically goes to a vote if you get to that point. But
And then what happens if it's close and the chair, like that was the one part of the question, right?
Does the chair vote in that
And so I
case?
think if it's close, well, the chair votes according to our code, but under Robert's rules, slightly different proceeding. And right, is the chair doesn't vote,
No,
but
I think they vote.
if it's a tie, then it goes towards sustaining the ruling of the chair. That's what I think is the answer.
there's an
It's
answer
fuzzy.
there. I don't
So-
remember what it is.
Anyhow, this is all work in progress. Probably this is as much as we need to go on this. If I could leave you with one thing, if we could leave you with one thing, Matthew, Jamie, Anna, it's use your points of order. Don't feel like you shouldn't or can't. If they become dilatory, that's another conversation. If the whole point is just to delay and they're not real and they're over and over again, then the body can have a different set of kind of processes that we can implement. But as a general rule, the idea is if you see it, say it, because if you don't say it when it happens, it didn't happen. The ship sails. And the leadership needs your help to keep order and keep things on track. And so, and make yourself heard, even if it's loud. So, in whatever way that takes, it's tricky. Okay, so now we have just 10 minutes left to kind of go through member business. We'll start with Mr. Presverdia. And thank you, Matt and Jamie.
Just, I got a couple things, updates. The task force that's working to reimagine what is the future of our public safety commission. We had some updates on this, but so some press went out on it, but we had our initial meeting, and then based on the information we learned from that meeting, we have kind of taken a pause on those for a bit to restructure it so that it's very transparent and it's engaging to the community, and it really is very purposeful. And so we are not having meetings in July. We'll pick up again in August. And so more to come on that. And we also, believe in the original resolution said we were going to be giving monthly updates to the body. And so that's being prepared as well. So look forward to that coming soon. I think that's all that's worth mentioning it now. There's some things in the works, but I don't think it's ready to be shared at this point. So
thanks, Aaron.
I just wanted to preview something that you will be seeing a work session on at some point in the next several weeks, unclear when that will be, regarding a resolution about better public meetings. So I've been working with a number of community groups who are very interested in really studying and understanding how we can improve our public process as the municipality in general, but specifically with respect to assembly and committees and those sorts of things. And this group of organizations, to include the Federation of Community Councils, in understanding how we can beyond the community council in our community that are generally underrepresented in. And there's actually a group that is very excited who does this work professionally. It's all they do is they study democratic processes and make recommendations with the cooperation of local government, who is very interested in partnering with us here in Anchorage to do this Better Public Meetings study. It's extremely interactive. It involves the public, and it also asks something of the legislators to participate at different points in some critical but small ways. So you'll see an invitation to a work session about better public meetings, and that is what that's about. I just wanted you all to have a preview of that before that invitation arrived. Not going, oh, what is this? And this is just part of my both personal and professional interest in making our government more accessible to the public. So.
You had a separate matter that we discussed this week that I think is worth bringing up the administration's here in relationship to impacts of federal law.
Oh, yes, correct. So I did open a conversation with a couple of folks here in the administration asking to really do a study at the Anchorage level so that we understand what the impacts are of the budget reconciliation that was signed into law last week at the federal level, and understanding that there are going to be some changes in federal funding to Alaska, some fairly significant cuts that we are going to experience, understanding how exactly that will impact Anchorage specifically and what we might need to be prepared for as a municipality feels very important and very timely. So I have opened that conversation. There are others on the administrative side of the House that are thinking in that direction as well, and I hope to carry that forward and have updates for you in the future.
I assume, Joe, you guys are analyzing the law for its impacts, and then the departments are getting their kind of ducks in a row. Joe's nodding his head. Go ahead.
I don't know what the reception would be like or what the venue would be, but I think it'd be interesting to invite our federal delegation to participate in a conversation.
I agree with you.
All right. So beginning to kind of come up kind of membership to really grapple with what does it mean and how are we going to deal with it. So thank you. And we have 3 minutes left. Is there a motion to extend by 5 minutes? I think we can probably get through
So
it.
moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Barley, seconded by Ms. Baldwin. Is there any objection? 5 minutes? No. Seeing, hearing no objection will be extended for 5 minutes. Go ahead, Zach.
No updates.
Thank you, Yarrow.
There's several individuals and families with children in camps. And what I'm discovering is that they're having a difficult time accessing any type of shelter or housing. So I'm starting to just kind of research ways to address that. And I'm not sure if that's through requiring the municipality to provide some type of year-round rather than just cold weather shelter for families with children, or if it's maybe tackling the way that we prioritize people into housing, because right now we prioritize people into housing that have been unhoused the longest. And so I don't know if we want to continue doing that or maybe make a shift to where we're actually putting people into housing that are ready for housing or that have children or jobs. So I'm kind of starting to research that a little bit. Thanks.
Sure. An Assembly Council sent me my screenshot today of the projects that council has for me. And some of them I actually even, that's still happening, great. But I guess right for me, two of my priorities right now, I mentioned, I think in the last Rules Committee, one of them for me is a short-term rental tax specific to short-term rentals, 5% in addition to the existing 12% room tax, that when the revenues would be dedicated to our municipal housing fund that we started a couple budget cycles ago. And Chris is going to join me on that project. And I think at our last Rules Committee meeting, I think it was Yarrow who also wanted the Airbnb or short-term rental tax. We take one other person, so I'm just putting that out there again.
I would, but I thought it was full. So I think I asked to be on that.
Okay, Paul, we're taking one other member, whoever wants to, so just,
I'll do that.
you can be on that. We're doing another short-term rental. It sounds like Zach's gonna be on it, so it's gonna be me, Chris, and Zach. Okay, gone. Great. And then my other project, the one that resurfaced for me with this screenshot was, I do want to re-explore automated enforcement. So those are, I guess, my two top priorities right now.
So I would just say if you're going down the road, is beyond red light enforcement, traffic enforcement, because.
Are you volunteering to be on that project as well? Okay, thank you. Then pipe down.
I'm just saying that there have been some conversations about noise. And apparently these new tools have the ability to capture when someone's exceeding X number of decibels, which is unhealthy and unsafe. And so I just would carefully frame it to capture more broad than just the red light runners.
Yeah, it can be more and then some.
Are you connected with anybody in the administration about this?
I've had
interest?
very preliminary conversations about it.
Okay, I'm aware that there is interest.
Awesome, great.
All right, Anna.
Yeah, just a couple updates. Well, I guess also I'll just say I'll be on the phone because I'll be out of state. So I'll be in the meeting, but not, to Chris's point, not serving as vice chair in that meeting. I believe Cameron's stepping into that. So just why I'm not in that seat. Two items, both on our agenda, but just to give a heads up. One is AO 2025-63, the self-storage conditional use or what to do with those in B3 zones. I'm going to request that the body postpone that to August 12th. I'm working on an S version. That was Felix's ordinance. He's happy to hand that off. And I had another kind of idea that would probably be a separate ordinance that's going to run with it. So the idea is to give time to introduce that other ordinance on the 29th and then move forward. So just up to the body, but that would be the request to push that one out a little farther. The other one I'll just mention, it's already on the agenda with Felix. It's another ordinance. I think it's AO 2025-83. It's increasing the cap of fees that cabs can charge. So you can read about that one, but essentially the cab industry folks approached Felix and me separately. So we decided to work on it. And the industry will speak to kind of what their thought is there. But it did go to the Transportation Commission, not because it was required to, but we referred it there. So we'll get some answer there. That's just being introduced. So it'll come up at a future meeting. And I think that's it for me. Thanks.
All right, and I'm not going to brief on my projects right now. I gave a substantial briefing last month. We'll just ask, does any member of the public wish to be heard? Oh, Mr. Gerker, you're on the phone. Do you have a project update?
Not at this time. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. And so any member of the public wish to be heard? I don't see or hear anybody. Anyone on the phone? Nope. Okay, so if there is, Anna, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say the Munification work, the Muni's 50th anniversary is moving forward. I won't give a substantive update, but if you're interested in participating in that, check in with those folks over there. And there's a lot of exciting stuff. So maybe next month we can give a better or bigger update on that. So thanks.
On that topic, have we found we're able to use the old city hall? Has anyone done that initial investigation for an event? Like in the interim, before they have opened it up, it would be great to have a party there, a gala there, some kind of a celebration at the old city hall for the 50th anniversary.
Not for our part, but I think we have a meeting upcoming with the mayor's office.
And I know I mentioned it, people said there was some interest. I would love to make sure we follow up on that, because the more I talk with people about it, the more excited they get about the possibility of, for a day, putting that building to use.
I think right now we're at the point that we need to get people to commit to doing an event and then the where.
No, I know. I think though, when you can visualize a thing, it's easier to buy people in. Okay, so any other comments before we adjourn? I don't see any. We'll go ahead and adjourn. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock at the Assembly Chamber at Lusac Library. We're adjourned.